So, our first total war. All of the natural resources that the country has to offer is being utilized for the war effort. Now, some of those are going to be obvious. Gasoline, metal, things that we need to build guns and bombs and tanks and planes and all that stuff out of it. But just, and arguably more important, is food. Considering that food items are necessary for the Army to do what it does best. In fact, logistics, getting supplies where they need to go, making certain people are where they're supposed to be, is really the hardest exercise that the military has. And so, in order for us to have enough of these supplies for the troops, things like butter, meat, and margarine are rationed in the U.S. starting on February 25th. Rationing had been a long-standing thing in the other countries of Europe, and this is where the war hits home. Going without comforts, being limited on what you can buy and what you can't have. And a lot of the stuff that we take for granted just simply isn't made. Resources that you're used to having is just gone. This would be like, limiting your access to the internet, for instance. I find is a pretty good example because some of you guys already experienced that. Some of you guys, you can only use it for so long, you can only use so much data, and then suddenly shut off, But let's say all technology, you can only use your technological devices one day a week.
Why do they block everything on Wi-Fi?
On our Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
Well, the idea is to try to prevent you from accessing certain stuff. Now, you're talking about something I'm unaware of. I don't know the answer to that. If you guys think you guys can access the Wi-Fi, yes?
Yeah.
They made a new, they got like a new one.
Yeah. And so, what can't you get on?
Any social media?
Right. That's an interesting question. I suppose the question comes down to how much can we trust you guys? That's the big question. Can we trust you guys to use social media whenever you're not doing anything constructive, but whenever it's class time or whenever it's I actually really be doing homework, things like that, you're not going to use it?
You obviously don't trust us, but it's probably a good thing that we do it.
Yeah, it's fair,
Because now we actually do work.
I love that that's been recorded on the internet too. You guys know I'm recording your lecture today, yes?
Excuse me?
Oh, yeah, I know.
You guys are getting recorded today, so everything we're saying is going on YouTube.
Hey, girl and boys.
Hey, yeah. Those guys at home. I actually think more parents listen to it than actually students do, because
My parents have no clue about it.
Yeah.
They have no clue what happens.
well, they can find out easily.
I know even what I learned in school.
They never ask.
You learn schooling.
Oh, frick.
But no, but back to your original point is guys, that's what we're trying to do. Really, what I really think is get you used to the idea of not having it, so that when you get to college and there are literally zero limitations on you, you make the good choices. Because to be perfectly honest, in college, no one is there to ever check if you go to class, at all. I knew people who no, I'm just going to play WoW. I'm going to play World of Warcraft instead of actually go to school. And of course they fail. So, that's not a good choice. But, it's like training, I suppose, with everything else. Because, to be perfectly honest, most of you guys probably could get away with doing a lot of stuff like that. You'd probably just be fine. But those who can't help themselves, it's just, taken away. Well, that's not what addiction means. Addiction is not, I really, really like something. It's an inability to function normally without it. True, that's a compulsion. The compulsion is not indicative of addiction. For instance, anytime I walk through the the checkout counter of a gas station, I'm compelled to buy Skittles. I don't always do this. You know, if I don't have Skittles, I'm not like I'm stopped functioning. You know, a great example of true addiction that most people in the United States are actually familiar with is actually caffeine. Caffeine addiction is very real. It's very common in the United States. It's a drug that we're always pretty comfortable using all the time.
It's a drug?
I had
Oh, yeah.
caffeine last night.
So I'm a drug addict?
I had it this morning.
Well, yeah, technically, if you're addicted to it.
Yeah. Every time I do is coffee.
The thing of the matter though is saying like a drug. What does that word mean? Because we use that word all the time. It's like, are we talking about medicines? Because all medicines are drugs.
Do you ever see the show Intervention?
No, but I know what you're talking about. I've seen like what it is. I know what it is from experiences. Yeah. I mean, the thing of the matter is that true addiction, experiences that people tend to have with it is something that is, we overstate a lot of things. We say the word addict, say the word addiction, things like that. We often are using it to downplay it unintentionally. Like, I hear people all the time say, I'm so addicted to whatever. I'm addicted to Netflix. I'm addicted to this. What they're really saying is I really, really like it. The problem is that someone who's actually an addict who experiences that, they go through an experience where without this substance, they're not normal. It's not just a matter of, I'm enjoying it, I'm getting something out of it. This is like getting up in the morning and you are not normal until you have this.
Like you're alcoholic.
Well, yeah, alcoholic is a form of addiction. So it's this, that's what addiction is. Saying I really like something is not an addiction. Caffeine addiction is a real thing because if you look at people who are addicts to caffeine, they are not normal unless they have it. They don't feel good. They have headaches. They have irritability. All these different types of reactions to it.
It's like you're not yourself without Snickers.
Kind of, yeah.
You're not yourself without your...
I mean, people aren't addicted to Snickers, but I see what you're saying. Is you're not normal without it. I get what you're saying, yeah. That's pretty much exactly what the textbook definition of addiction is, and that's what's really scary about it, because, the amounts, as you get used to the drug, goes up and up and up and up and up and up. So, like, for instance, alcoholics, my grandfather, when he was still alive, he was drinking, I think, a 12 or 24 pack a day of beer.
Same.
Yeah. My,
You? No.
she said, dang, yeah.
Oh, you said same. No, I said no.
You guys are, well, okay. Like my wife, her uncle, who is an alcoholic, he actually works for Alcoholics Anonymous now, he was drinking like a keg every other day. Just like downing it. And then he would run marathons. Like you would never know he was an alcoholic, but he was absolutely one. It's one of those types of things that we have this vision in our mind of what like an alcoholic or an addict looks like because of TV and media, things like that. Most addicts, you have no idea they're addicts unless you're living with them. Sure. But yeah. That's all stuff we talk about in sociology, by the way. Just throwing that out there.
I think alcohol and drugs are a really cool topic to talk about.
Well, they're fascinating for a lot of different reasons, especially because why did we pick those drugs? If you think like Oxycontin, things like that, are every bit as terrible for you as any of the other drugs. Why are they acceptable, or why is like marijuana not? And the answer is generally racism, historically speaking. If you look at our first drug laws in the United States, like for instance, why do we ban marijuana? It's because those dirty Mexicans were going to come up from Mexico and they were going to steal white women and they were going to do it by using that drug. So we better ban it so the Mexicans don't come to the country. I'm dead serious. That was the rationalization.
I've heard that.
Marijuana. It was illegal because we thought that Mexicans were going to steal white women with it. Same thing applied to, what's that drug? Opium, only with Chinese. It was just abject racism applied to something. Because, if you're from these countries, you're a drug addict, it's, sort of like how Irish are all drunks, that sort of thing. just racism is all it is. So it's fascinating from a historical context.
Can you be addicted to anything?
Yeah. Now, not everything is addiction, but all drugs are poisons. That's another thing. Your reaction you're having, you know, all that is also at the same time as that thing is slowly killing you. Caffeine in high doses will kill you. Sure. Now, for you to drink enough coffee to kill you with the caffeine dose, it's something like 38 gallons in an hour or something like that. It's just like a huge amount that you would never be able to consume. But the thing is, you can buy pure caffeine on the internet. People have bought it for the purpose of mixing up like Monster energy drinks at home, things like that. And they're like, yeah, I'm gonna make this extra caffeine, and bam, dead.
You know those things can kill you, actually.
Sure.
Well, I mean, like, I think the guy from Red Bull who created the guy.
Well, that strikes me very strongly as a urban legend. But I can tell you this: like any drink, any of the like, if you're drinking caffeine or Red Bull, things like that, you can't drink enough of it to kill you in a short period of time. There's no way. There's not enough of the drug you can do. Sort of like how smoking cigarettes, nicotine is a poison. In fact, you can make a fairly gentle bug spray, a bug killer, by taking cigarette butts and letting that tobacco stuff leach out of it for days, and then you get this like black kind of liquid that you can spray on bugs, just kills them instantly. I actually made a bottle of it for my garden because it doesn't hurt the plants that it gets on. It doesn't transfer the carcinogens to the plant. It just, you know, affects anything that gets sprayed onto it. But it's one of those types of things that's like, you don't realize how much of this stuff is poison, it's killing us just really, really slowly. And it's like, whoa, dude, you know. But let's talk tobacco for a second. Why do people smoke? Well, that's not why they start smoking. It's like, I want to get addicted to something, might as well do tobacco. Well, stress reliever. That's one of the big reasons. Yeah, be cool. Yeah, to some extent, I suppose. I mean, I tend to find most folks who get into smoking do it because, you know, why not? I'm just going to try it. You know, you only live once. YOLO, and you know, they do it, and then the addiction sets in. Like, it can happen incredibly fast. Like, if you're like, once to do it once is enough. Once is literally all I can take sometimes. And you know. The reason is that it's a drug. It's a chemical. It's a depressant. So what happens is if you're stressed, you want it more because it calms you down. As we talked about with the war, you know, these types of things. So, you know, in historical context, people weren't as aware of the negative aspects. You know, they like, for instance, oh, it wasn't that great for you, like it was a vice. But smoking a cigarette is no different than having a cup of coffee. You know, it's just going to have, you know, whatever, you know, that sort of thing. Not realizing how terrible these carcinogens are for you, especially considering a lot of unfiltered cigarettes. So, you know, we're talking some pretty terrible, terrible, terrible things. You know, my grandfather, the same one who's the alcoholic, also smoked like a chimney. I think he was a 2-pack, 3-pack a day average type of person. He died in the hospital because the cancer he had ate through his aorta, and he actually literally bled to death as basically the vein exploded, and he ended up vomiting up blood by the bucket and just bled out. Arguably one of the worst deaths I've ever heard of. I wasn't there. My dad saw it. He saw his dad die like that, and to this day, he's very anti-cigarette, as you can imagine. So,
why did people smoke cigarettes
don't smoke.
back then? Why did people smoke cigarettes back then? Like,
my grandfather was in World War II.
Right, it was, like, you know, it's like it's all over your clothes and makes your breath smell, and if you do it, and then, like, if it's marrying something, it just smells. Like, why would they do that?
Well, whenever you smoke, you don't smell it.
But other people just
True, but you also get used to it if you're around it all the time.
But back then, all those other people smelled too, so it wasn't, it wouldn't just smell terrible, you know, they sound like they were putting something on their knees or.
Well, maybe, probably. I mean, from pesticides, things like that. That being said, it's never been like, you know, good for you or anything like that. But I will say this is that, you know, it's one of those types of things that everybody does that you don't think about it. You know, not to mention, you know, there's a lot more pollution. I think people tend to look at with pollution today, it's like, oh, how badly polluted it is. In the United States is actually really clean compared to a lot of places. I mean, look at Beijing, China, look at crap, you know? And you know, just kind of get used to this way of living. You know, the thing that's crazy to me, a friend of mine told me this when he was in medical school. You know, U of L, they actually still do, they do like dissections on cadavers. You know, people donate their bodies to be dissected by medical students so they can learn about anatomy. And, you know, the students are very respectful of everything they do. It's one of the rules after days, any bones have to be saved and preserved because they bury the bones after the fact. And so you don't lose bones, you don't take bones, you don't mess with the bones. They're serious about it. Like if you screw around with the bones, you're kicked out of medical school. Done. And no one will pick you up. It's like an instant stop to your career. So they're very serious, very respectful about it. And one thing he told me when they were doing the lungs is this guy had like lungs that were like black on the inside. And he wasn't a smoker. No, he just lived in downtown New York because of all the pollution. Yeah. Now this is not as bad nowadays, as it said, because then this guy was, I don't remember how old, like 60, 70, something like that. But still, it's like, you know, cities are dirty places compared to other places, and this is kind of how it goes down.
Can we get acquainted, like going to school, you know, and we get acquainted about it?
Because we're talking about a lifetime. We're talking about like, you know, a couple of years, not a big deal. Plus, you know, this guy lived in downtown Louisville. He was here all the time throughout some of the most polluted points in our history. I mean, crap, look at how cars used to work with carburetors. I don't know what that means, but basically it's whenever you have an engine using combustion, you've got to have a mixture of oxygen and fuel. And carburetors use gravity, and so what happens is they're really inefficient. Basically, the stuff coming out the back of the tailpipe in the car in the 1970s was way more polluted than stuff coming out of the car nowadays. So, you know, it's gotten better, is what my point is. By the way, a little bit of housekeeping. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, that was the official treaty ending Russia's involvement in World War I. So you know that.
Was it between Germany and Russia?
Yes.
Ireland can get out of a war,
Yeah.
like that, just like that.
Yeah.
What is it?
It helps if you're desperate. Yeah. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk was a treaty between Germany and Russia that ended Russia's involvement in World War I. See, here's the thing is, Germany had to split their army in half. Half of it was fighting against the British and the French and their allies over here in the west, and they were fighting the Russians over here in the east. With the Russians out of the war, this half of the army, which was distracted, can now come and fight against the British and the French. So basically, their army is going to like double up. And remember, their army had been holding off these other two this entire time in fighting and matching them. So basically, this was a major thing where the Allies were like, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, but then the Americans are showing up too, so it kind of balances that. So
if you get out of the war, they just leave you alone, they don't ever come to your aid or anything?
no, I mean, that's what a treaty is. The war is over. Now, the aspects of the treaty are for debate. Now, like for instance, like let's say they're about to invade us and we're losing our butts, and we would just want to, where we have to sue them for peace and say we surrender. Okay, we give up, and then this is where you can ask for certain terms. We will surrender if, whatever, you leave us alone. If, we give you this territory and you leave us alone, or whatever. That's the aspects of the treaty. Then there's also unconditional surrender. It's basically, I surrender to you, I'm totally in your power, I ask for nothing. Okay. Now, this is not an unconditional surrender. This is basically Russia saying, we can't fight the war anymore. Russia, Germany's like, that's cool, get out. Let's concentrate over here. They weren't concerned with Russia. They just wanted to end the war. Because Germany, at this point, also wants to end the war.
It's a really good deal.
Well, yes, but also they were undergoing a revolution. So, it works out well for Russia, kind of, but also they're not going to have a good time either. So.
And it's not like they're a small country.
True. True.
People.
But most of them, keep in mind, are in the west. Russia's a big place, but a lot of it's Siberia, which is, basically ice and tigers. So, it's not exactly like the tigers are going to be signing the police treaty. But anyway, the 100 Days Offensive is the big Allied push into Germany. On the first day of the Black Day, 100,000 German troops are captured, and this is going to be sort of the beginning of the end for Germany. So Germany, at this point, keep in mind, is looking for a way out. Why are they able to do this suddenly? The use of tanks. That's a burger tank, that's a tank. Burger tank, destroy your hunger. Other tank, goes over trenches. Burger tank. That's the guys who are being captured. The thing I want to point out to you guys is how old are these guys? Not
The
today,
one
at the
sitting
time.
up looks
Probably
really
like
young.
18.
The one sitting up looks like he's like, could be 15.
About 16,
Next one, which one?
which is,
Yeah.
you guys said once fighting the war.
The entire war?
So you were allowed to be drafted at age 16.
Yeah,
It's just like
yeah, 14 is what some of these guys were.
Did the women get drafted for like nurses at that time?
Women are never drafted.
Yeah.
No, even today.
Well, I mean, we're not there. I mean, like, we're like,
No.
who helps, like,
No, now, certainly women can be nurses, they would sign up to be nurses, but you're not, we're arguing over terms here. They're not drafted, that's a force during the Army now, they weren't drafted. They were volunteers, and yes, they were. Gotcha. So I just want to point that out to you, because we think of this as all happening a long time ago, and be like, oh, these are old guys, you know? Yeah, but they were your age at one point, and that's when they were fighting and dying.
Or just
I just think that's kind of an interesting point to make, because, you know, you guys thinking about where your lives and things like that, is you're always, you know, you're old enough to fight a war.
But those girls out here yesterday from, they have to go to the army.
Yeah, there's many countries where military service is just mandated. Everyone at a certain age goes in the military.
Could you imagine what like the U.S. Army would be like if we were all had to do that? Like,
It would be utterly different because it's a volunteer army at this point. The fact that it would be forcing a lot of, we've talked about it, trust me, but it's been debated in government, and basically the military is very against, like, that's a terrible idea, because then you have people who don't want to be here, you know? We want an army made up of people who want to be in the military, not people who don't. All that being said, most people I know in the military don't want to be in the military, so, you know, there's that. You know, it's like the Navy, never again volunteer yourself. Anyways. This is a rationing card, and again, things that were necessary, or were necessary for the military were rations. So if you want to buy, say, gasoline, you had to have this little card with you, and it would be stamped, and then you could buy a certain amount and on you go. Now, I think this one's actually from World War II, but you get the idea of what we're talking about.
What's
Mr. House actually has a rationing book.
the Black Day?
That's the first day of the 100 Days Offensive. See how once you have 100 Days Offensive? That was that Allied attack.
Yeah.
Now, this is the Hindenburg Line. It's a series of fortified trenches that basically protects the German interior. This is the last line of defense for Germany. If this goes down, the war's over for them. And so they're going to put forth their best effort to defend the Hindenburg Line, and it's kind of their last hope. So Germany is basically trying to sue for peace at this point. They're trying to basically end the war on a strong note and say, you know, well, we can keep fighting, but, you know, it's been going on for a long time. What do you guys think about a peace treaty? And basically, America's like, that sounds good, let's end this war. And then France and England are like, no, absolutely not. One of the things you're going to find out about France and England at the end of the war is they're going to try to make Germany pay for it. They're going to make them ashamed. They're going to really beat them down. And basically, most scholars of World War I will point out that if Germany was treated a little bit more kindly, gentler, you know, if we had done like this 14 points idea that Woodrow Wilson came up with, odds are good World War II never would have happened. So whenever I say that World War I basically caused World War II, it's France and England, yeah. Mostly France. Blame the French. The Germans certainly did. Anyways, so the Allies attack the Hindenburg Line September 29th, and it falls. And obviously, you know, Germany's going to lose the war. So Kaiser Wilhelm II advocates on November 9, 1918. This is going to signal a series of political peace treaties and ceasefires and armistices that eventually meet up at the Congress of Vienna, or excuse me, not Congress of Vienna, the Treaty of Versailles. That's two different things. And basically, we have the Paris Peace.
What's abdicating?
Abdicate means he comes off the throne. Gives up the throne. This happens a lot in wars whenever you have a monarchy and they lose. They will surrender the throne, and that basically gives a new politician another chance to work out a peace treaty. It's a way of trying to like shield his people, so to speak. So what are the 14 points? The 14 points are Woodrow's peace plan. We're actually going to read that tomorrow. Basically, the 14 points were aimed at ending a lot of the things that started the war to begin with. Some of the ideas that come out of it are self-determination, which is the idea that every single nation should have the right to pick who their leaders are. Also, a victorless end to the war. Basically, nobody wins, the war just ends, which, as you can imagine, sounds great for Germany because they're losing. However, France can't accept this. France has been decimated by the war. Keep in mind, most of the battlefields we talked about were in France, and so they need to rebuild. They can't afford to rebuild their country after this war by themselves. They need to extract some wealth from Germany if they're going to rebuild themselves to the way they were before the war. Not to mention, they're kind of out for revenge in the first place. You might remember one of the main reasons they joined the war in the first place was because they wanted revenge for the Franco-Prussian War. So this is their aim of doing that. So what's going to happen is they reject the 14 points, but Germany accepts it. And so whenever Germany eventually comes to the bargaining table, they're expecting to follow the 14 points of the peace treaty, but France and England push to really humble Germany and break them down. And because of that, Germany feels betrayed. Meanwhile, the 14 points tries to establish a League of Nations, a political entity that aims at talking about problems before they break out into war. So this is sort of the predecessor of the
So they tried to establish one.
a League of Nations. It's sort of like the United Nations, actually. It's the predecessor to the United Nations. So the idea is that we're all going to meet, we're going to talk about our problems before a fight breaks out, you know. And again, this is something that actually happens, but here's the weird thing. It's also a mutual defense treaty. The idea is everybody in the League of Nations defends everybody in the League of Nations. So for instance, if one of our members gets attacked by another country, now every single one of us declares war on that country. So it's a huge deterrent for anybody to mess around and start wars, because that's going to bring basically another world war about.
What if someone in the League of Nations?
Attacks another nation?
Yeah.
This is where we're into political problems and why the League of Nations is too weak, because Germany does that in World War II. And the League of Nations is like, well, you should stop doing that, and Germany's like, I'll do what I want. And basically everyone's really afraid of another war, and so it goes on for quite a while. So ultimately the League of Nations is completely ineffective. Oh, and by the way, the United States doesn't actually join us. Because here's the thing, is that clause about you have to declare war is unconstitutional. According to the U.S. Constitution, Congress, and Congress alone, has the right to declare war. If the president wants to go to war, he has to ask Congress, can we declare war on whoever? And they have to say yes. It's a vote, just like passing a law. And so if we have to declare war that bypasses Congress, it isn't legal. So this brings a whole kind of problem with that. So basically the League of Nations bill doesn't get passed, we don't join it, and the whole thing basically is weakened because of it as well. Not to mention Woodrow Wilson is really irritated at Congress for it, and this is actually politically, there's a lot of problems Congress had with Woodrow Wilson during World War I. So American politics, not that Congress would ever do anything to, try to mess up a president while he's trying to do things. That was a political joke, because that's happening right now. Anyways, moving on.
Is something wrong with Obama? Like physically?
Like
physically. Like, is he like sick or something?
Not to my knowledge.
Why? Because, okay, this is really dumb, and you're probably going to judge me really hard, but like I was going through...
We don't judge.
You might judge. So we were going through a grocery store, all those little tabloids, and it said something about him being sick.
Yeah. No, that's my knowledge.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries.
This is like in terms, but how do they decide where the location for a war is?
Well, generally, it's not so much a deciding factor, it's that wherever the two armies happen to meet. Usually, they're going for specific objectives. For instance, let's talk World War I. You remember how I was talking about how France had reinforced all these defensive points, right? Okay, so that meant Germany couldn't attack that. So they had to go around it, and the only way they could do it was going through Belgium. So they were limited on where they could go. That's generally what's happening, is there's only so many places you can attack. But always, whenever we're talking about attacking somewhere, there's a purpose to it. This is where we come into military objectives. So there's something about the land that we want, whether it be high ground, or there's a power plant there, or it's an Air Force base, or whatever.
But if you find more there, isn't it all destroyed?
It can, although it just sort of depends. Like in the case of World War I, yeah, everything's decimated. Nowadays, we don't fight like that anymore. So, you know, that is certainly a concern. You know, you want to try to use as little force or as accurate a force as possible. This is where we have like bombs, for instance, that can go through a building and not detonate, and then only detonates in some small part of it, you know, because it's a targeted strike. Now, sometimes that can go wrong, and there's mistakes, but you know, they're a lot better than, you know, say in World War I, where basically bombs were hurling things out the bottom of the plane and hoping you hit the targets.
They don't mind like crazy civilians living in
I would say they wouldn't mind, but because certainly the soldiers like didn't want to blow up schools and things like that, but they also had their job and they had to try to just be as accurate as they could. So.
Is that why like in the movie like everyone is leaving?
Yeah, they're in danger. Although also you can see in some cases where, you know, the soldiers would do terrible things because they've been, you know, again, propaganda and indoctrinated to think these people, not just the soldiers, all of them are just like animals deserving to be slaughtered. You know, if you actually peel back the morale, like people say, like, you know, World War II was the last time that there was a clear bad guy. Anyone who actually studied World War II in depth will say nobody was the good guy. You know, because to be perfectly honest, there were American soldiers raping and murdering the Germans all over the place. You know, it happened. But we don't like to talk about that because, you know, these are our grandparents. We don't want to think about them doing terrible things, but that is war. I'm not saying that every grandparent who was in World War II was doing those things. I mean, my grandfather was on a boat stationed in the Pacific. I doubt he had any opportunity to do any terrible war crimes, but, you know, this is the situation of war. This is why people who are against war say, like, you know, there is no good guy in war. If you've gotten to a point where war is the only object, the only thing you have going on right now, that is the only way of expressing your political things, then you fail. You failed at policy. You know, it's just people don't like. They like to romanticize things. If that makes any sense. And that's one of the biggest problems I have with a lot of movies, to be perfectly honest. That's why I like Saving Private Ryan, because you look at the reaction of the U.S. troops, and one of the scenes, they're just massacring Germans as they're trying to surrender, and they're just kind of like, you know, oh, I'm sorry, I don't speak your language. And then they ask the guy who does speak German, what were they saying? He was saying, they were saying, please help me, and they were laughing at him. And you're just kind of like, whoa. And you realize that war makes monsters of us all. That's the true horror of war, you know? So not everyone's good and depressed. Let's talk about the League of Nations. Actually, we already talked about that. Let's talk about the Paris Peace Conference. I abbreviated over on the board over there, it's PPC, so in case you want to know what that is, Paris Peace Conference. Big three, Woodrow Wilson, the President of the United States, George Clinton, so the Prime Minister, I think, I'm not sure what his rank was exactly, but France, and then David Lloyd George, who was the Prime Minister of Great Britain. And then you also have representatives from the other defeated powers. And basically, the idea originally was, hey, we're going to do the 14 points. And then, no, we're going to do these other things. And so at the end, Germany is playing for the war. So Germany has to admit that they started the war. Did Germany start the war? No. That was Gabriel Princip, who was Serbian.
Did he kill
You got it. Adam starts the war, not Germany. Germany's just backing up their allies. But keep in mind, Serbia and Austro-Hungarian Empire, they don't have no money. They can't cover this. So basically, France needs Germany to be the blame. So they make Germany the blame for the war. So they have to admit they started the war, even though they didn't. And then they have to pay reparations. You know, these are payments to try to recoup the losses of the Allies to the tune of some $30 billion. Now, what's interesting is the U.S. actually. We were given some reparations. We, in order to help out Germany, basically said, yeah, you don't have to pay us. And that kind of helped Germany out a little bit, but they're still going to have a lot of problems. But to put you in this perspective, Germany still technically owes money for this to this day. It still hasn't been paid off. Now, part of that's because they just kind of stopped paying them, but, you know, they still wouldn't have been able to pay. I forget the exact money. It's in trillions of dollars, though, when it's actually accounted for inflation or anything else like that. It's just an unbelievable debt. that destroys the German economy. We'll get to that in a second. And then their armed forces have to be limited. They can basically hold a parade. That's about it. And that's just to physically weaken them, but it was also to humiliate Germany. Germany's their power was in their military. So getting rid of that isn't just a matter of getting rid of the military, it's also getting rid of the culture. So what are the effects? As I told you, World War I led to World War II. Treaty of Versailles. First of all, the German economy is in shambles. Keep in mind, pretty soon after this, in the turn of the 20s, we have the Great Depression, which hits the entire world, by the way. It's an international depression. So they're going through this major crisis in the middle of the depression as well. So basically, the average German laborer is starving. There's not enough money. Even when there's jobs to do, money is being printed at such a high rate to try to pay off these debts that the Deutschmark effectively becomes worthless. There's hyperinflation setting. We're talking inflation that's happening so fast, what would normally take hundreds of years is taking hours. So money is just losing all value. So their economy is in shambles, and people are desperate and hungry. Furthermore, they're humiliated. And their culture is demonized throughout Europe. Anything that was German was seen as barbaric and crude. And so essentially, Germany is made the laughing stock of Europe. They're basically getting bullied by all of Europe. And so they're angry. They're angry at the rest of Europe. They're humiliated. They're just frankly mad as hell. And they're desperate. And there's not a lot of hope until a young politician who's an up-and-comer, who's a very good speaker, starts telling them, you shouldn't be ashamed. You should be proud because your history goes back centuries. You're part of this proud Aryan master race. Starts talking about, I have a solution to your economic troubles. And sure enough, through his policies, Germany's economy just completely bounces back and becomes a powerhouse. Of course, he partially does this by turning anger away from the German people and the rest of Europe and says, who is to blame? Who is to blame? It's the rich people. Just so happens, though, that a lot of businesses that survived throughout this period of time were owned by Jews. So we blame the Jews because it's an easy scapegoat. And so people are hating the Jews. They're feeling nationalistic pride in their country because that's what they need to hear to bring them out of this collective depression that the war had put them in. They are angry. They want to get revenge on the rest of Europe, and so that's exactly what's going to happen. Not to mention, the Treaty of Versailles actually ended up taking land from Germany. Like, I'm not just talking about areas that are debatable, like Alsace and Lorraine, which have kind of French and Germans in it. I'm talking areas that are definitively German, like the Rhineland. They speak German, their culture is German, they should be part of Germany, but they're just not anymore because the Allies are going to take it from them and use it as basically like a hostage kind of situation. So Germany's mad as hell. And Hitler focuses all this and channels it and is able to get the German country back on its feet again. I mean, to be perfectly honest, let's go through a hypothetical history situation. Let's say Hitler didn't kill the Jews. The Holocaust never happened, okay? He would be remembered today as one of the greatest politicians of the 20th century. Hands down, no questions asked. Even by stealing all the money from the Jews, people do that all the time. That's not a big deal. We're only upset when he starts mass murdering them. And even then, we weren't really that upset about it. We were most upset about him invading other countries like Poland. This is the thing of it is that, 100 years ago might seem like, oh, that was forever ago, or not seem like, oh, it's not that long ago. It was in the 20th century. I remember that because I was born in 1999. But the fact of the matter is that, it was quite a long ways away. And, this whole attitude of, mass murdering your own people is wrong is a new concept, which seems like, well, shouldn't that have always been wrong? No, look at what America did to Native Americans. I mean, if we actually take the word genocide and break it down, we run into all kinds of problems. We take the Holocaust, for instance. What is a Holocaust? Let's out of curiosity, because that's the last slide. I just want to look it up on the old Merriam-Webster online, or just Holocaust. Definition. Here we go. Holocaust. Destruction or slaughter on a mass scale, especially caused by fire or nuclear war. A Jewish sacrificial offering that is burned completely on the altar. Oh, you guys can't see that. I'll move it over so you guys can see it. Okay. So, Destruction or slaughter on a mass scale. Is that very helpful on a mass scale? Like, let's say a lot of people die. How much is a lot of people? That's really up to interpretation. Would you guys say that 750,000 is a lot of people? Okay, cool beans. Especially caused by fire or nuclear war. So does that mean our dropping the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we committed a Holocaust?
Yes.
According to that definition, yeah, absolutely. Oh, you know, it's one of these things that, you know, we're kind of fine with it unless we're not fine with it. That's the truly horrifying thing about it. Like, we look at the mass killing of people going on in North Korea. Millions of people dying. Do we care? No, it's over there. It's a bunch of people we've never seen, heard, don't know. Whatever, let them care. Yeah, there's going to be people who are talking about, like, you know, well, this is upsetting, but that's all that they get to it. You know, I've seen more people outraged about ISIS beheading, you know, a few Christians here and there than, you know, the millions dying in other countries. You know, not that I'm saying what ISIS is doing is in any way bad, shape, or form. It's terrible. But, I mean, shouldn't we get some perspective here? I mean, you know, if we're doing devil's arithmetic, shouldn't we stop the millions dying before we worry about 100? You know, this is the problem. Like, we'll often say, why do we learn about the Holocaust? Why do we say it will never happen again? It happens because it did. That's not why we do it. We'll talk about why we do it.